these quasi-municipal agencies.
The executive, the city should be saying, what can we do, private industry, for you to, what do you need from us to do this, okay? If you need extra sewers, we can do that. If you need wiring put in through the streets, we can do that. If you need certain permits speeded up, we can do that. I've always felt there should be on permitting, there should be a sunset provision. You apply for a permit, and if you're not rejected in 30 days, it's yours. The city can reject permits, that's fine, but you got to do it within 30 days. Okay? And you just got to do it and have a process where it's done and not hold up business. And have them know that we are business friendly, and you will know in 30 days whether your permit is accepted or rejected, and you won't have to wait for 6 months like I did when I tried to get a porch built on my house to get a permit to put in a 100 square foot porch.
You weren't by any chance in a historic house, were you?
Exactly.
Wow.
But that's a good point. Streamlining things so that people get a yes/no answer and treating everybody fairly.
I think that little business cluck, and without speaking to the merits of it with this type of thing, they should have been told within 30 days, yes or no. They could be told no. If the neighbors really objected and had good reasons, 30 days it gets rejected. But they should have known in 30 days and not had to sit on this for 6 months and more before they got an answer.
Hatching their eggs for 6 months.
The licensing board. Much has been made recently of the fact that despite arguably being one of the more liberal cities in the country, a city filled with not on my watch Darfur signs and hope and change, we literally have, one would argue, child slavery going on right here within this city. Now, it's my understanding that Mr. Ronaldo has decided not to run again.
That's correct.
All right.
Appointment again. He's excited not to take another appointment.
Thank you, Mr. Ronaldo, for stating the obvious. Folks, if you're not from Providence, recently we had a tragic situation with one of the adult clubs in town where it turned out there was a 16-year-old dancer engaging in prostitution in the club, and the city clamped right down on them and suspended their license for how many days?
45.
45 days. Wow. How enlightened.
Well, you just ruined that sponsorship for us.
Well, they spent all their ad money on gray paint for the building. So it's a much more tasteful establishment now.
The mayor, under whom his and the prior administrations has successfully ignored this situation, now all of a sudden wants a one and out. What should the Board of Licensing be doing? What is their real role, and how do we prevent this from happening again?
I think, in that particular instance, that club should be closed. You can't allow that type of prostitution going on. There has to be an example made of that. You can't allow prostitution to be going on in those type of clubs, certainly with a 14-year-old. There's a larger issue of what we should do with all of these type of clubs, with all of the late night bars and the like with this time. And I think they've been a little too Victorian in some senses at this particular time. I'd have no problem with later closing hours and the like. Perhaps serving stops at 2, but they can stay open till 4. You can let people gently go about and not dump onto the streets at one particular hour. There are things they can do. And again, it's very much political of how these things go, and very little input from the public in Providence about what should be done.
And that's a big problem because often the public has people in positions with experience in those areas, and they have valuable insights to contribute. I would want to have bar owners sitting at a meeting like that to talk about what works for them and what doesn't work for them.
Should we have a combat zone here in Providence?
Constitutionally, these places have to exist. Mm-hmm. Okay? There's no way you can ban them. I think it would be better to, yes, have a combat zone and know that that's where it is at this particular time. It's a legal activity for 18-year-olds, not 14-year-olds, not
right.
Prostitution, but yes, dancing, and including nude dancing, and it's a constitutionally protected right. And we should have places where, the places are better patrolled and are safer for the patrons in some senses, but are also set away and can be from homeowners and the like, or other businesses that might be set up open at night.
Well, in a way, that's what we do have on Allens Avenue. It's not really a...
Correct. I agree.
It's not a residential area. It's not really an upscale commercial area. There isn't much reason to be on Allens that time of night unless you're headed home from Providence to Edgewood or stopping at a strip club.
But you drive by, there's no windows. It's a pretty pink-colored building used to be there. So.
Now it's a tasteful dove gray.
But isn't it sad that we're using one of our most viable commercial zones in the city? I mean, that's our waterfront.
What conceivably could be one of our most viable commercial zones.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I would imagine that one of the commercial aspects of having a combat zone is you put it in a less desirable area. You quarantine it. It's, some would argue that it's really one of the only growing parts of the Rhode Island economy at this point.
Well, it's on the waterfront, so maybe when the sailors turn up, they can...
Yeah. Hello, sailor. But yet at the same time, you talk about getting back to the vision thing, you've got this industrial waterfront there that has all sorts of industrial potential.
Yes.
It's not particularly clean land, so I don't know that it'll ever become a residential hub.
Correct.
But we're wasting it right now.
We're wasting it at this point, and again, we're wasting it large scale because of the permitting, and for the barriers that have been put up to improve that area at this particular time. I think that the strip clubs would probably be driven out if you could really let that area develop as it should, and let it develop on its own.
Right, it would be priced out of the market.
Right.
Let's talk libertarian politics in our remaining moments here.
Fine.
We get pulled in. There's so much going on in Providence. Now, again, another reference for you and I. Remember the Carol Burnett show, As the Stomach Turns?
Oh, yes.
That's Rhode Island politics.
Yes.
There's so much to talk about every time. We could go 2 hours with our guest. What's your take now, given the demise of the moderate party or the near-death experience of third parties here in Rhode Island, and as the former head of the Libertarian Party, what or if has to happen, to be a successful third party in the state?
There will never be a successful third party in the state.
Oh,
I started out, as a Republican, Physicians for Reagan in 1980, switched over to the Libertarian Party because I didn't like what the Republicans were doing, and switched back 10, 12 years later when I decided that the laws are set up that there will never be a successful third party in this state. The future of the libertarian movement lies in taking over the Republican Party and not accepting a lot of the stuff that you hear from Midwest Republicans as their philosophy at this point. I just don't think that the laws are set up that it will ever happen. Ken Block had put in his own $1 million to do this and had no success doing this.
Was that in part because he became the face and the sole face of the party? Or is it simply the regulatory environment just doesn't permit it?
Well, both. Certainly, it was a personal service vehicle for him. But the regulatory environment doesn't allow it. You need 17,000 signatures valid thing on a petition for a legal party in the state. If I had gotten 2 more libertarian votes at the Republican convention 6 months ago, you'd have a libertarian as head of the Republican Party controlling the ballot, the Republican ballot in this state. Oof. That's what the Libertarian Party needs, control of the ballot box.
You realize Mr. Smiley has identified himself in public forums as someone with libertarian sentiments.
Yeah, I understand that.
Do we need to give a libertarian intervention to Mr. Smiley?
You really need to give a libertarian intervention to
because ultimately, there, as I see it, and I want your take on this, there are 3 Republican parties in this state. There's the Chafee Aberdeen Republicans.
Yes.
There's the Reagan Republicans.
Yes.
And then there's a small, hardy band of libertarians out there who believe that conservatism actually means the government staying out of your life.
Yes.
How can those 3 groups ever coalesce?
It's not going to be easy. The RIRA group is really very divided. It's actually more so divided than either the Chafee or the Libertarians, who I think work together quite well. If you remember the Republican primary for delegates to the Republican presidential convention, 3/4 of the delegates were Romney delegates, 1/4 were Ron Paul delegates. I went to Tampa as a Ron Paul delegate and voted for Ron Paul on the floor of the Republican convention. The Libertarian Republicans had a big say, and they were very successful in that primary.
How do libertarians educate people who want to be conservative, not quite sure how to be conservative, that libertarianism really means fiscal conservatism and social independence? How do you do that in a state like this?
Well, I think you talk about it with other Republicans. The big thing that I always get from both the Chafee-Avedisian role and the RIRA role is the foreign policy. They can't buy into the non-interventionist foreign policy. They can buy into everything else. And you need to take that issue and put it aside and say, listen, this is Rhode Island politics. We're not going to determine whether we bomb Iraq or not anyways. Let's talk about the sales tax. Let's talk about education and educational grants. Let's talk about inheritance taxes. Let's talk about property rights. Let's just put it aside and deal with Rhode Island issues at this point.
We're a big fan of Dawson Hodgson on this show.
As I am.
We had him on a few weeks ago. Just everything that's right about what could be the Republican Party in this state. Yet, for everything you say, he was skewered because he didn't believe in raffling off rifles or Stinger missiles. And somehow a guy who just represents everything right about the movement, in every sense of the word, you got this one wing of the rah ring who just can't let that go.
And they're the loud wing.
And they're the obnoxious wing.
I heard they throw a heck of a Christmas party, though.
Ooh. What are they raffling
We don't
off
discuss that in polite society.
So in your mind, then, as far as you're concerned, with all this experience in politics, libertarians have to find a way to storm the palace.
They have to find a way to storm the palace, which is really very simple if you go about it, because there's so few Republicans who are involved. It's really very simple to storm the palace and to get on state and city committees and elect a state central committee that will make the changes and ignore the radicals in the National Party.
Which, by the way, is some of this very similar advice that Mr. Rickman gave us a few weeks ago. Almost the exact same advice.
Just get rid of the... And you see, again, this is politics, free speech, America, participation. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. The trouble is, ultimately, if you don't get elected, you can't change things.
Correct.
And that's our theme here.
Right.
How do we make change? How do we affect change in the state?
You've got to get on the ballot. And I think the way to do that is to seize the Republican ballot.
It is the time of the show where we have to wrap things up, and it is the time of the show where we ask our guests to let everybody out there know how they get a hold of you, they get more information about you, and how they support your campaign.
Sure. I'm running for mayor of Providence. The Twitter account is at Dan Harrop, DanHarrop. The Facebook is Dr. Daniel Harrop. And I'll give you my office phone number, 401-272-4838.
You're writing that down, psychiatrist's office phone number? You got that? Did you get that down?
That's the political office, but the secretary will put it through.
Political interventions, the doctor is in.
272-4838.
Do you take Obamacare?
No.
If you missed any of that, you can check our Facebook page. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
Check out coalitionradio.us, Frank Caprio next week, and I think the week after that I'm not going to be here, so I want you guys just to come in here and go crazy and raffle off some
We'll see how much
tags.
dead air I can leave out there.
Thank you all once again for tuning in. CoalitionRadio.us on Facebook, Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, and on the almighty Twitter, which I hope you will once again support now that I am a stock owner of Coalition Radio, Coalition_radio. An IPO comes out, and I'm just like, take my money. Just take my money.